Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the NBA Front Office Show. We've got a ton of NBA news to talk about, which is the way it goes this time of year. All kinds of trade rumors and things like that. So if you're not a subscriber yet, hit that subscribe button on the NBA Front Office YouTube channel and over on the podcast feed, Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe both places. You can watch on the YouTube channel. You can listen and take us with you over on the podcast feed. Keith, how are you doing? It feels like every day we get closer and closer to the trade deadline, we're just going to get more and more little tidbits coming out of trade news here.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. We are recording on Wednesday today, and tomorrow, Thursday the 4th, will be 5 weeks exactly to the trade deadline. So we are almost there, almost into a month out. So we're starting to get things happening. We're roughly a week and a half away from basically everybody who's going to be trade eligible will be trade eligible. That's coming right up. So we've got that happening, and just all sorts of stuff going on right now, which is all good, right? It's very, very busy time for the league because you've also got 10-day contracts starting. Contract guarantees are on Sunday. It's really the 10th, but you got to waive guys by the 7th. So that's when that'll happen. So we just got to get a lot happening around the league. Very busy transactional period.
Yeah, it's a busy time, which means it's a busy time for us as well. I guess let's just dive right into it. Adrian Wojnarowski had a lot of stuff today over on Threads, where he does kind of a weekly question and answer there. The first bit that the Hawks are open for business on a trade. This is, I mean, we've already heard DeJounte Murray. What other Hawks do you think could be on the move here at the deadline?
Yeah, so I don't know if you do get the emails that are like odds emails and all that stuff
I
from
do. Yeah.
various sports books. Bogdan Bogdanovic like let it off. Now I think it might have been in, yeah, it looks like it's in alphabetical order. So that would actually it's not. Never mind, I take that back. That is incorrect.
So
What
it
I
is
just
based
said.
on the most likeliest to be traded?
I don't know. I don't know what the main part of this is, but it's he is he was the first guy in there. Did you see who had the top odds to trade for him?
Is it the Lakers?
It's actually the Boston Celtics at 2-1.
Oh, sorry. It's the Lakers for DeJounte Murray, right? I went
I
back to the
believe
other
so.
play.
Yeah,
I believe so. Yeah,
that
yeah.
would make sense. Yes. The Lakers they're like 9-1 in the middle of the pack. Now, the only reason I'm bringing that up, it's not because it's a Boston thing, and Boston's not going to get him. They don't really have a reasonable way to trade for him. But it is interesting that he kind of led off the whole thing. 18.7 million this year, 17.3 next year, 16 million, and then a $16 million team option in 26-27. So reasonable-ish contract, especially for what his production is. I do think there's a good chance he gets moved. I think they're very open to moving DeAndre Hunter if they can. I think maybe Saddiq Bey could be in play. Maybe this is the year somebody moves on Clint Capella. We'll see. And then DeJounte Murray, as you mentioned, he's been kind of the most prominent guy out there. I don't think anything happens with Trae Young. It's too hard to move Onyeka Okongwu with the poison pill. And then Jalen Johnson is kind of a budding star for them. So it's definitely a team to watch for sure. Just with all those kind of guys, they're an expensive team, they're an underachieving team, so that is a little bit of a mess in Atlanta as well.
So let me ask you then about Clint Capella. What's his market at this point? Because that's a player that he's got a little bit of name value around the league. He's a player that most people recognize. He's making 20.6 million this season, 22.2 million the season after that. Then his contract expires. What kind of value would the Hawks be able to get on the market for him? And should he be the guy to be traded and maybe clear the way a little bit for Okongwu?
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at Clint Capella because the team that had been linked to him forever was Dallas, and now Dallas has Derek Lively. So I don't know that they're feeling like we got to jump in. And then you start looking, all right, well, what other playoff teams could use him? Not Boston, doesn't fit there. Not Milwaukee, not Philadelphia, not Miami, not Orlando, not Indiana, not Cleveland. New York, maybe, but probably not. I would guess. I think they'd rather just ride it out with Hardenstein. That's it for teams with a winning record in the East. So then you jump to the West. Definitely not Minnesota. The last thing they need is another center. I don't think the Thunder make a ton of sense for him. I think they would prioritize a more versatile 4-5 type big. Definitely not Denver. Clippers, probably not. You've got Zubac, Tice, and Plumlee now healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Kings, no. Pelicans, no. Dallas, we just said no. Phoenix, probably not. Houston, where he kind of came from, I don't think so. Not with Şengün's emergence. And then you get the Lakers and the Warriors as your other two teams there. I that's the challenge, right? Is anybody going to be all over it? Because he's not that he's not good. He's just a one-dimensional center at this point.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the question. Like, is he a positive value on this contract, given that he is a one-dimensional center? I mean, it's not a long contract. And so sure. We talk about this. It's not always the dollar amount. It's the years that really matter. But 2 years under contract at north of 20 million per, you're talking about about $43 million commitment to him over this season and next season. Is that one where the Hawks could recoup value?
I would say it's probably more neutral. I don't think it's bad. I don't know that I would say it's good, right? I think if Clint Capella moves, it's probably part of a much bigger trade where a team is like, we're going to remake ourselves. And maybe it's not one of the contenders, right? Maybe it's one of the bad teams that says, hey, we feel like we can jump in and really remake some stuff and move some players around and get things in a better balance. And maybe that's how this goes down. There could be a way that's how this all comes together, where he's just not, I don't want to say a throw in, but he's just a big part of a much bigger trade where a lot of pieces move around.
Yeah. Well, the Hawks will certainly be a team to watch. I don't know if I put them in the same stratosphere as like the Bulls or the Raptors, who we're going to talk about in just a moment once again. But they are a team that seems to be in the upper echelon anyway, the upper level in terms of teams that are likely to do something at the trade deadline. Like, they feel more likely than a lot of other teams to get something done. To wrap up on them, though, Bogdanovich, your thoughts there? Is that a guy that your Celtics should go after?
I mean, they should. They just have no reasonable way to match salary. That right. Salary's too big for them.
I should have said could.
Yeah, that's the challenge, right? I mean, the guy they were also linked to is Kelly Olynyk. He's $12 million. Is also a little too large for Boston to reasonably get in on. In order for them to get anybody who makes more than about $8 to $10 million, they have to part with a rotation player, and that just seems highly unlikely. They're pretty happy with their top 8 guys, and for like Olynyk, I've seen some people say, well, could they trade Horford? I don't know what that does for you. It doesn't really change anything. And I don't know that makes sense. Horford is still playing very, very well. It's not that Olynyk isn't playing well, but that doesn't change anything. You're still in the exact same spot you were. So I don't know. I don't, that one doesn't make, normally when Vegas odds are kind of out of nowhere like that, it does perk me up a little bit, but I can't, there's no reasonable way to get to the matching salary. So I just don't think it happens.
Yeah. You can look at it and say, well, clearly somebody knows something, right? When you see numbers jump like that, Generally. But still. All right. Let's talk a little bit about the Nets. This again, coming from Woj. According to Woj, there's a lot of teams I know that would love to have Mikal Bridges, but Woj is saying they want to build around him. They want to build out their roster around him, which makes sense. Like, he was, of all the things that they got from the Suns in exchange for Kevin Durant, he was the centerpiece. Like, he was the big piece in all of that. And he's also really, really good. He's a good basketball player. And, he's had his ups and downs throughout the course of the season. You can look at his shooting percentages and things of that nature. But if you're the Nets, he's a good young player that's pretty versatile. And it would make sense to be in their position to say, yeah, we're gonna hang on to this guy, unless maybe somebody does something crazy in a trade offer.
Yeah, post trade deadline, Mikal Bridges was at 26 points per game with the Nets, 47%, 38% from three, average 6.6 free throw attempts per game. Small sample size, of course, because there's only 27 games. But that's really, really good for Mikal Bridges. And I think what's happened is he's still been good. He just hasn't been that good. And that's where some of the frustration has creeped in. This team, too, I think there was almost this thought of, hey, we got Bridges and Cam Johnson, and we stayed a playoff team, and we were in the postseason. Yeah, but you're in the postseason because KD and Kyrie and those guys got you there, right? That's how they got to the postseason. So I think your challenge is if you are the Nets, you didn't you kind of were buffered by that great start early with the star guys, and then you kind of moved into the next piece. So I think we're just in a weird spot with the Nets where it's like, what are we kind of looking at here with Bridges? Is Bridges the guy you build everything around? Or is he like, he's a really great guy if he's your two and an incredible number three, and we still need to go get that main guy? Those are the questions I think the Nets have to be asking themselves right now. But that team's a mess. They have like 2 wins in their last, I want to say it's like 11 games, and both were over the Pistons. So that's not exactly a lot to write home about.
And that's where some of this stuff comes from, right? Is fans start clamoring for, well, is it time for a trade then? Because things aren't going well. And, when things aren't going well, people want to see changes made. So I still think when we look big picture, though, it makes more sense. Again, unless somebody does something crazy, it makes more sense to build around him. But obviously the Nets could still wind up being a team to make some moves here. On the trade market, we've talked a bit about, like Royce O'Neal. Maybe he's a guy, Dorian Finney-Smith. Maybe he's a guy that they wind up moving on from. But to me, it makes all the sense just to keep building around Mikal Bridges and say, you know what? Yeah, the shot percentages haven't been quite what they were, but what he did last season, we already saw what he can be, and let's try to build around that and get him back to being that.
And you have him on such a good contract for the next couple of years beyond this one that I think even if you do decide, all right, you know what, he's a number 2. All right, so you have him at 23-3 next year and 24-9 the year after that. That's fine. That's perfectly fine for what he maybe is as a player, even if he's that lesser version. So I do think there's a world where the Nets could kind of pivot in a lot of different directions here. I would say it's probably time to think about breaking up that forward log jam. There's just a lot of forwards on this team. You can't play them all. Even a guy like Trendon Watford, who I like a lot and had been playing well for them, he's now completely out of the rotation. That happened about a week or 2 ago. So you just got to start rebalancing the roster a little bit. They need a little bit more playmaking and shooting, and that should be something where maybe you just find that balancing trade, right? Where it's, hey, we're going to move a forward and we're going to bring back a wing or a ball handler who can create and just kind of go forward from there.
All right, so let's jump over to another wing that this one we know is actually on the market. Mikal Bridges, I don't know the Nets are even going to be that eager to listen to offers, but Pascal Siakam, we know, is a guy that the Raptors are going to listen to offers on. Whether or not they move him, we'll see. We've talked about what is actually best for them, but they already made a moved OG Anunoby. Now will Pascal Siakam be next? And the Pacers, according to Woj, are a team that is in on him. I like the landing spot with the Pacers. How do they get there? And is there something that satisfies both the Pacers and the Raptors, some kind of middle ground here?
Yeah, so the good thing for the Pacers is they're still able to get to about $9 million in cap space. So that is huge for them if they want to make a trade for a guy like Pascal Siakam, because instead of having to match on his full $38 million contract, they've only got to send out about $29 million in salary. Now, that's still a lot, but the question becomes, could they sell them on something centered around Buddy Hield, or maybe Buddy Hield goes to a third team and Siakam goes to Indiana? Because otherwise you're talking, all right, here's 3-4 guys that we get to pile together. Now, Toronto does have an open roster spot after the trade with the Knicks, and my guess is they're probably going to sit on that until the trade deadline. Just makes it a little bit easier to maneuver if they need to. So that's where you could get there, right? You could get to a spot where they make a match that makes sense. But maybe this is one where we got to get a third team involved, where we got to get Buddy Hield off to a third team. Or if the Raptors are saying, hey, you know what, we intend to stay competitive with Quickly and Barrett and Barnes, maybe they say, you know what, we'll take Buddy Hield. We feel like he can fit here. He gives us some shooting and we feel good. And I'm not saying it has to be Buddy Hield, because it doesn't. There's other combinations, but that's just the easiest one to get to without involving a 3 or 4 for 1 kind of package.
Yeah, I mean, there's some other guys that they obviously they're not going to trade Miles Turner. I would have to assume Bruce Brown's not going to be
Yeah, I wouldn't
and
think
not
so.
going to be. I don't think they would move on from him. But they do have some interesting players here that they could stack up. Like who's outside of Halliburton? Who are you making untouchable? If you're I'm assuming Miles Turner would be out as well, but who are you making untouchable if you're the Pacers in any kind of Pascal Siakam trade talks, or is it just Halliburton, Turner, and everybody else will listen to?
Yeah, I'd have to be really convinced on someone like Bennett Matherin, just
That's the one
because he's
I'm wondering
good,
about.
he's young. Yeah, that one, I, I don't know. I'd have to really feel for Siakam, especially. Like, I'd have to feel like, all right, that's the guy to kind of
Right.
lead us forward here. I'm just not sold that he's that guy. But everybody else, yeah, I'd be open to. Obi Toppin hasn't really found a home there. They just drafted Jarris Walker, but he hasn't really gotten out of the G League for them yet. So maybe you could move on a guy like that. Neesmith is hard again, poison pill guy, so probably not him. Brown, you just signed him, so probably not. So yeah, that's where it starts to get a little messy. Maybe TJ McConnell could go because they do have enough guards. You've got Andrew Nemhard back and playing healthy. There's not a ton of minutes behind Halliburton anyway, so maybe you could go something like that.
Yeah, there's plenty of options here for the Pacers. I like the landing spot. We'll see if the Raptors wind up making a move. I'm happy that they already made a move with Anunoby so that we don't have to complain about them anymore being that team that throws all the players out there on the market and then never actually does anything. They got something done, which is great. And now we'll see what happens with Pascal Siakam.
One last thing on this one, if I can. With the Pacers, if you're going to trade for Siakam, you better feel really good about your chances of keeping him.
Yes,
because you're not close enough to make the all-in trade right now. Like they're a good team. They're probably going to be a playoff team, but you're not that good. Like you cannot see, and Siakam is not good enough to lift them into the conversation with Boston, Milwaukee, and Philly, at least in my opinion. So you have to feel really good about if we get him and re-sign him, then we add and tinker around him and Halliburton and Turner. Now we can really start to build this thing out. That's something you have to be really cautious of if you're Indiana.
100%. This would be the piece that leads to the final piece in my mind. That's what would happen here with the Siakam move, and that final piece would probably be something they'd be looking to add over the summer, depending on what happens with a few other players and all of that. And some of it could come from organic growth, depending on if they're able to hang on to Benedict Mathurin and some of the younger players. All right, let's jump over to the other team that traded with the Raptors, and that was the Knicks. The Knicks reportedly will always have interest in Karl-Anthony Towns. The same, I don't think, can be said of the Minnesota Timberwolves and their appetite for trading him, especially given how well they've been playing this season. I know we've heard the little rumblings that maybe they should move on from Towns, but given where the Wolves are right now, I just don't like. Yeah, the Knicks have interest, and that's fine. But I'm sure not that Towns is in the same tier or anything, but I'm sure the Knicks have interest in Giannis. I'm sure the Knicks have interest in Luka and all these other guys that aren't going to move. I just don't see the Wolves being in a spot where they're saying, okay, now is the time. Let's move Cat.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. They have finally seemingly cracked the code with him and Gobert playing together. Obviously, they're leading the Western Conference. Towns is his overall counting numbers may be down a little bit from earlier in his career. Rebounds have fallen off, but that's obviously because Gobert is there. He's not having to rebound as much. His scoring is down, but Anthony Edwards has emerged. His efficiency's up. He's at 51% from the field overall, 41% from three, which is ridiculous for a 7-footer. Still gets to the line 4.5 times a game at 89.5%. So that is, really good stuff for him. He's up around 3 assists per game. So that's pretty solid for a big man. So I think this is more of a, hey, if anything goes sideways or you fall apart and lose early in the playoffs and decide you need to blow it up, we're here. We're willing to always talk to you. But I just there's nothing there. It's funny because when you were saying the Knicks will always have interest, in my head, I'm like, as do the Timberwolves and 28 other teams in the NBA.
Exactly.
And countless thousands of teams around the world would have interest in Karl-Anthony Towns. So yeah, I find it very hard to believe he's going anywhere. The other thing too is it's important to remember with Towns, he's like in the same boat as Devin Booker. His Supermax extension kicks in next year. All right, so he goes from 36 million to 49.7 million. We mentioned Woj had some stuff in his threads chat today. I'll mention it here because we're talking about the Wolves. Somebody asked, are they going to be willing to go deep into the tax next year? And I thought he gave a pretty insightful answer, which was all small market teams say they will for a contender. And basically, that's what the Wolves are faced with right now. You're a contender. Are you going to go deep into the tax? They have for just Anthony Edwards, Rudy Gobert, Jaden McDaniels, excuse me, Naz Reid, and Karl-Anthony Towns. They're already at $165.6 million. The luxury tax line is set to be 172.5 next year. So they're basically a tax team for 5 guys. That's Edwards, Gobert, McDaniels, Reid, and Towns. So that's before re-signing Mike Conley, before filling out the roster, any of that stuff. So they're going to have to go deep into the tax or make some major roster changes. My guess is they probably, as long as they have a good season and a decent playoff run, they will go into the tax, but it's probably very much a year-by-year thing for the Timberwolves.
Makes sense. And also remember, we've got a new ownership group there. And so that's, maybe a factor as well. What's their appetite for spending?
New ownership group that had to bring in a third partner very late in the stages to complete buying the team. So maybe the tax is not something they're looking to jump into. I would hope that's not a case. Like that, nothing's worse than a new ownership group comes in, buys a team, and then immediately is like, oh yeah, poor mouth, we can't pay these guys. Sorry, too bad.
Right.
Like, hopefully this is the best setup for sustained success the Wolves have had since Kevin Garnett was there by far. Yep. You can't tear this down now.
No, you definitely can't. There's just no way. There's no way. However, it won't be Karl-Anthony Towns. I feel pretty confident saying this. It won't be Karl-Anthony Towns, but the Knicks believe that they still, after doing the deal with the Raptors, they still have enough assets left over to get a significant player on the trade market. So let's speculate wildly. Who could that significant player be that the Knicks would be targeting?
Before we go there, man, your segue is on point today. It's new year, new you, new segue.
On my A game, man. I'm on my A game. That's for
rolling
sure.
Today. I love it. Let's see. So, let's start with they're still sitting on Fournier's contract, right? 18.8 million this year. You've got a 19 million team option next year. So the Knicks are in a good place with that. There's a world where everybody is like, why did the Knicks pick up his team option going into free agency next summer if they don't move him at the deadline? And it's because they've got him lined up as a trade piece. That could happen. So that's kind of your big piece. They've also got some extra draft picks. I think their draft picks are a little overblown with how good they are because some of those are like Pistons with crazy protections on it, Wizards with crazy protections on it. They may, who knows if they ever see them, and if they do, they're not going to be great picks. So that starts to turn into a little bit of a question mark there, but you have them, so you can always put those in. Who could they go get? Clearly, it seems like Donovan Mitchell is still a guy they would love to have. Cavs seem to have no desire to move him now, probably not this season. So that's why I think this could be something that drags into the summertime, and maybe it happens there. I think this was more of a story of, hey, we didn't go all in and trade everything we could to go get a OG Anunoby. We still have a whole lot of stuff we can do. I mean, they could even be in a position, let's say they feel really good about Isaiah Hartenstein as their starting 5. They could maybe move Mitchell Robinson in a trade this summer if they felt like, all right, we got to go in a different direction that way. If they feel good about their wing depth, Quentin Grimes, who was famously off the table earlier, could be back on the table in trade talks. So we're in a spot where, this could just be a position where, the Knicks got a lot of different ways they can go with this, and they did not lock in fully on any one path, I guess, by trading for Anunoby.
Yeah, that kind of flexibility could serve them well. Now, I hope they're not just limited to CAA clients, but those are always guys to keep, kind of like the Lakers with Clutch, guys to keep an extra eye on when we're looking at the trade situation. They do seem to gravitate that way, don't they?
Yeah, a little bit. There's definitely something there. OG Anunoby's one of his agents is the former president of CAA. it's his son. So
Mhm.
that my guess is they've got some inside information on how that may go play out as far as contracts go, and that's not a bad thing, and it's not a criticism by any means of the Knicks. I think what's interesting too is you're going to have to make a decision point at some point of, all right, does the Randall Brunson drivers of our offense, does that pairing work? Is that really what we want to be moving forward with those two guys, or does
Mhm.
one of them need to move? Probably more likely to be Randall. It seems like Brunson's the guy who's a little bit more locked in and stable there, but we'll see. I think for now the Knicks have set themselves up to be a pretty good, solid team the rest of the way this season, and then we'll kind of see where it goes. But they definitely do still have the ability. They are right in that belief of, hey, we can still go get somebody. That part is definitely true.
Yeah. Yeah, and so there'll be another team to watch here as we inch closer to that February 8th trade deadline, as a team that could potentially, make something happen, which I think so far anyway, this year's trade deadline, it feels kind of similar to last year in that there's more buyers than sellers, which I think is a
Mhm.
byproduct of the play-in tournament and all of that. Um,
Yep.
but I don't think that necessarily means there's just going to be no action. Like that was the fear last year, was that the sellers, the asking price was going to be so high because there were so few sellers that it was going to stagnate the market. And then that's not really what we saw. There was a decent amount of movement. I think we're going to get the same thing here, where ultimately there's enough teams that have incentive to move on some guys that will get some moves being done. Will the Knicks be part of it? Probably. I mean, they're probably going to use that Fournier contract in some way. And there's a number of teams that I think are highly motivated to try to make a move. So all of this, Keith, I think is setting up for, and again, I don't want to overhype it, but at least an active trade deadline here.
Yeah, I'm with you. 8, 9. I'm just counting up. There were like 12, 13, 14 trades on trade deadline day a year ago, and they ranged all over the place. We obviously had the
Mhm.
massive Lakers, Jazz, Timberwolves trade. There was that Clippers, Lakers, Nuggets, somebody else, I don't remember who, trade where a whole bunch of dudes moved around. The
Orlando.
Bucks. Oh, Orlando, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Bucks got involved in a trade. You had that four-teamer that almost got undone
Oh,
later in
that's
the
right, with the
day
Warriors.
with Wiseman. Yeah, Josh Hart
Yeah.
got moved by Portland to New York. There were some smaller types of deals that happened as well. The Pirtle trade also happened on trade
Mhm.
deadline day. And a few days out from that, we had the um, couple small trades with the Kings and the Heat. We had Kyrie Irving was a few days ahead of the trade deadline, got dealt. We obviously had the Harden stuff earlier in the year with that. So there was just a lot of stuff that happened. With that, the Hachimura trade, that's the one I was thinking of. Was the Hachimura one happened towards the end of January? So yeah, we're in a spot where there's definitely things are gonna happen. It just may take a little while. And that's something that again, Woj has been kind of hammering on both TV and in these threads Q&As of, hey, don't expect a lot of movement right now. Like this
Right.
may be another 2, 3, 4 weeks, even. And may probably trade deadline week is when things will really start to pick up. And that's also a good thing, too, because by then you just have that much more clarity of, all right, are we actually making a run at the play in or the playoffs? We're not. All right, let's start to look at a different direction. Or, yeah, we are. We need to load up and go get someone.
Maybe we'll get the infamous "Good Lord" tweet from Woj with the
I
damn
hope
damn burst like 5 minutes before the
that'd
actual
be great.
deadline hits.
That is the
That would
dream.
be fantastic. That'd be fantastic. All
Yep.
right. Well, I think that's everything that we've got for
We had a couple
today. Again.
minor injury things. Did you want to
Oh, okay.
cover those?
Yeah, yeah.
D'Angelo Russell has looks like a bruised tailbone.
He does. He has a
Um,
bruised tailbone. He took a
yeah,
charge, I believe it was, in the game the other day, and
so he'll
he
miss the night
landed on
game.
his butt. So,
Yeah, it happens. Painful.
so yeah.
I had a friend that happened to, just as an aside, once in a basketball game. He got one of those ones somebody bridged him on a layup and he got
Mhm.
wiped out, landed on his tailbone, and then was like he went into like a semi paralysis for like 5
Oh
minutes,
man.
like could not move. Ended up being perfectly fine. He actually went on to play 4 years of college basketball too, but it was really scary stuff. We were, I think we were in like eighth or ninth grade when it happened, and he got wiped out. So yeah, scary
Keith, I'll
stuff.
never forget doing that wearing rollerblades. Back in the day, I
Oof.
was probably in like third or fourth grade, feet went out. I went down and I was going fast too. So I hit hard. And I remember like at first it hurt and then I was totally fine. And looking back now, I'm like, I would just be dead. Like I would not recover from that. And back then it was like, okay, I was down for like 5 minutes and I'm back up and I'm good to go. Oh,
there's a comedian who does a
old.
really funny routine about like what age is it where you just stop getting the wind knocked out of you? Like it used to happen all the time when you were a kid.
Yep.
And then you turn a certain age and it just never happens again. And he was talking about how, like, if that happened to me as an adult, I'd be like, 911, like, I need like an ambulance right now. I can't breathe. And he does like the whole funny voice where it's like, I can't breathe. Please send help. And like, he's really funny. And then he goes through the whole thing, like how, like it always happened when you're riding your bike and then you mess up your handlebars and never, like, the alignment is never right again and all that stuff. Very funny routine. If anybody knows of it, they can drop it in the comments on the show here. And then the other injury was Gary Payton II. That was the only other one that came across while we're recording here. If you saw it during the game last night, you knew it was bad. He went down immediately, grabbed at his hamstring, and he could barely get himself off the court. And now he's going to be out several weeks. Just a ruined couple seasons for him with injuries. He had that, we almost get the trade reversed, recovering from an abdominal injury last season. And then, and then just, was out recently this season. And now he's just getting back. And he was recently out with a calf injury. Now he's out with a hamstring strain and will miss several weeks. So, and that's a Warriors team that isn't super duper deep either. So that's a pretty big loss for them.
Yeah, absolutely. That absolutely is. So, the Warriors have been struggling. You know what? Injuries. I know yesterday we got to talk a lot about players coming back. Stay healthy, everybody. Stay healthy.
Right.
Let's keep these guys on the floor. All right. Well, I think that's about it. So everybody make sure that you do subscribe to the Front Office Show here on YouTube. Don't forget to follow us over on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts as well. We'll be back tomorrow with more. Till then, everybody, see ya and stay safe.